Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about The Moonbase by Kit Pelmer and directed by Maurice Barry in his first Doctor Who directorial story. Now, Maurice Barry is probably one of my favourite 60s Doctor Who's directors, and which we'll get on to in his later stories, but this is his first story. Now, episodes 1 and episode 3 are missing in the BBC archives. However, thanks to the DVDs by 2 Entertain, we've got animations. And this one, the animations are by the same people who did The Reign of Terror and The 10th Planet. And as well, this story is the first second Doctor story to feature the Cybermen, which is really soon if you think about it. I mean, like, the 10th Planet and this story take place in the same season, which is just mind-boggling. But is this story any good? That's the question of the day. Let's delve deep into the Moonbase. So the story sets ourselves in the year 2070 with the moon having a base that controls the weather on Earth. Now, it is important to note that this is Doctor Who's first time going onto the moon, and this was 3 years, I think, or 2 years before Neil Armstrong did it for real in 1969. And so this story does have a big, important role in the series, explaining how the moon works in Doctor Who, basically. And who would have figured that that they actually landed on a giant space egg for a giant dragon? For those of you who got those references, well done. You are an absolute Doctor Who nerd. But I digress. So the Doctor gets involved in the base, but whilst this is happening, there's a virus that's been spreading out, a sort of plague that's taken out some of the men. Now, the story does have like a bit of a huge mystery building up to it, onto like what the virus is happening and stuff, and this all happens in part 1. And whilst this is going on as well, Jamie gets knocked out earlier on in the series, and he has very little to do in the story. You can definitely tell that this was made before he was considered as a companion, and he was quickly run into the story. Originally, his role was supposed to be given to Ben, being one of the sick crew members, but they kind of quickly rushed it. And Jamie's not even ill from the virus in his story. He just sort of gets knocked out at the start of part 1. So there you go. And whilst this is all like building up, the Doctor has probably one of his greatest lines in the series. Actually, hold on, let me see if I can find it in the book. Right, I'm going to have to try and do my Patrick Troughton impression, which I'm not... So if this is bad, I do apologise. There are some corners of the universe which have bred the most terrible things. Things which act against everything we believe in. They must be fought. Great line. Sorry if I butchered that impression, but I digress. So, yeah, we get a lot of great moments in this, and in part 1 it's revealed that the cliffhanger reveals that this story is actually a Cyberman story, like I said. But here they've got a nice redesign, as you can see on the cover. They are there's no human bits showing anymore. And their faces are now changed, so instead of having like a cloth, they have like this like metal, like a smooth metal like face. So this is the first time like an iconic looking Cyberman appears as well, and it's also the first story that we see him at least mentioning conversion, though in here it's mainly to do with brain controlling a few of the men. So we got and they've also got a much like bassier vocal chords this time. Gone is the high pitch strangeness of the 10th Planet Cybermen. So I personally prefer the original Cybermen. Like I said in that story, they have grown to become my favourite Cybermen. But this one, it takes them a lot more seriously. Which then brings into another point about the directing. Maurice Barry, he's known for putting a great straight face to Doctor Who. In fact, on the documentary, on the DVD, it is stated that Maurice Barry and Patrick Troughton wouldn't see eye to eye. Not that they would argue, but Patrick Troughton has a big bombastic personality, and Barry, he would tell him to bring it down a bit, calm it down a little bit, not so much flamboyant kind of thing. So here I think we get, and usually sometimes that could not work, and it could look like the Doctor's tired, but no, Patrick Troughton really owns the darker side of the Doctor. He's still silly, but when the story calls for him to be more serious, he is straight-faced looking at the Cybermen. In fact, there's a great bit where the Cybermen are going to shoot a laser beam at the base, and everybody tries to duck, but the Doctor's like, is the machine still working? Yes. Then I will stand still. And he looks at and the camera pans up onto him, and it's very, very serious. So, yeah, like I said, Maurice Barry is probably one of the best directors of the series. The great bit, right after the Doctor says that famous line, he turns to the head of the base, and the way it's shot, he's in the foreground, really big and imposing on the camera, and this boss character is in the back, kind of emphasizing that the Doctor is basically, in this situation, he has the power, he has control of the situation. But that's not to say the Doctor doesn't have his funny moments, when he's trying to find this a cure for this virus, or even what this virus is, because he doesn't believe it's a natural epidemic. There's bits where he doesn't know anything, and the boss person is threatening to throw him out, and so he babbles on about that he's almost ready to a cure and stuff. And there's also another bit where he needs stuff to research and stuff, and so whilst the base is doing their jobs, working with this weather machine, he's slowly taking hairs from them and stealing one of their boots without them trying to notice. And yeah, so you do get the comedy elements that Patrick Troughton is known for, but his story's a lot more serious compared to his other stories, which for this really works. So yeah, it turns out the virus is of course by the Cybermen, and that their plan is to take over the base and and destroy humans, so that they are neither a threat to the Cybermen. So this story is a great example of the Base Under Siege story, which I have delved into before in the 10th Planet. But for those of you who haven't watched that one, a Base Under Siege story is a Doctor Who status quo, shall we say, a type of story that Doctor Who does, where you have a base or an area, and you have a select few characters, and there are these enemies that are trying to break in to the base, and it's so up to our characters to basically defend themselves from the enemies on the outside. And the story sets it up very well. It might feel like it's rehashing some elements of the 10th Planet. You've got a base with a really tough leader character, who in this one is not that interesting compared to the one in 10th Planet. Here there's not that much emotional core to him, rather than the fact that, he's in a stressful situation with what he's doing. And a lot of the side characters here are pretty forgettable, apart from the fact that some of them have some ridiculous accents, especially the French one, which I found a bit, I don't want to say cringy, but yeah, it's sort of like that. But anyway, so you got that, and then you've got the first wave of Cybermen being only like a handful, like 3 at most, and then we find their weaknesses and take them down, but then a whole swarm of Cybermen come in, and we got to defeat them before they even get into the base and destroy everybody. So it does feel like a rehash of this story of the 10th planet, and a lot of elements as well, like I said, with the side characters aren't that interesting. So the story really has to keep the strength up with our characters. Now, like I've said before, Jamie has hardly anything to do. He falls sick and he doesn't do anything until part 3, halfway through part 3, where him and Ben sort of a different disagreement at the start with, and then they sort of like team up to fight the Cybermen. So Jamie here is a bit lackluster, and I wish he had a bit more to do. But Ben and Polly, they sort of get nice character beats with Ben, and tries to help the Doctor with the base and stuff, and Polly like keeping everybody better. Now that also brings, speaking of Polly, this story has been criticised for being a bit sexist, with Polly making just being there to make the coffee. However, a lot of people have argued about this, that she isn't in like a sexist role, because she the reason for the coffee does have a kind of a purpose to calm everyone down as the Doctor gets to solves the mystery of the virus. And later on, it's technically thanks to her, that we get the resolution as to why the virus is spreading, which is through the sugar. So yeah, I don't know how to feel about that. But there's a bit about this that not much people talk about, which is in part 3, with Ben and Jamie. They're about to fight the Cybermen, and Polly wants to get involved. But Ben says that fighting the Cybermen is a man's job, or man's work. So even if it's not sexist for the coffee scene, which personally I think that's fair enough. It is a kind of a big cliche, but it is no excuse for the scene later on, even if it's just like one moment, and she does get involved, but it's more Ben's reaction that, right, fighting, man's job, not fighting, girl's job. See, so I am on the fence on that criticism, and if that does bother you, then I am sorry. But the Doctor suits very well here, and it's, like I said, with Patrick Troughton and the Cybermen, it always seems to work. His flamboyant Doctor and his just basically love of life really is a really big juxtaposition to the Cybermen, which is this emotionless, basically just do it for the job Cybermen, and their voices, it's just like such an iconic battle, the second Doctor and the Cybermen. It's like the first Doctor and the Daleks, or like the sixth Doctor and Syl. You know, when you see these opposing forces against each other, just always striking. So yeah, and we get this whole plot with the machine that's working the weather, which controls with the gravity-ish. And the Cybermen basically want that so they can control the Earth. But the Doctor kind of realises that the Cybermen are basically also weak to gravity, which I don't know how that makes sense. But they're on the moon, so basically everyone's weakness is the gravity. So whilst the army of the Cybermen walk to the base, which is in one of the coolest scenes in the series, where the Cybermen marching up, and there's like at least 20 Cybermen in one shot, which is probably like the most you see of a villain in the series so far. And you see them all marching up, and it's really imposing, and you've got that really eerie Cyberman music, which basically becomes their theme for the 60s. And then you got the Doctor using the gravity to shoot the Cybermen up in the sky. Really silly scene. And yeah, it does kind of end kind of abrupt, but not like anticlimactic. You do have the big build-up of the gravity, and you do have, and it's not so quick that it feels like it's like, what, that's it? So it's not anticlimactic, it's just sort of abrupt, like, if that makes any sense. But anyway, so that's the Moonbase. Personally, I really enjoyed it. It's a few. I know it's a few people's favourite as well. But in terms of Cybermen stories, especially Second Doctor Cybermen stories, the best is yet to come. So there you go. That's the Moonbase. So join me next time where we have giant crabs and strange music in the Macroterra. So I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon.